Melissa Bradley directs the Juan and Lisa Jones Center for Career Preparation at Beacon College, America's first college for students with learning and attention issues, building a neurodiverse talent pipeline. She leads a team providing tailored career advising and on-campus employment services. Bradley partners with employers nationwide to develop internships and recruitment programs. A national board certified teacher, she began her 30-year education career specializing in inclusive language arts in Palm Beach County, Florida. She later led statewide education and career planning for the Florida Department of Education, impacting 74 districts and directing training for the facts.org student advising system for the Florida Board of Governors. Grant Harris is a certified diversity executive with a distinguished record of creating inclusive and equitable environments. Harris leads GTH Consulting, advising organizations on DEI strategy and implementation. Harris also serves as a senior consultant at the Department of Energy, where he's co-authored a digital DEIA toolkit and launched a national podcast. His expertise spans strategic planning, training, and data-driven DEI initiatives. Harris has driven significant improvements in employee retention and engagement and has a passion for fostering belonging and accessibility. Eleanor T. Lacano is the Henry and Phyllis Shook Term Professor of Business at William & Mary's Mason School of Business, where she directs the Inclusive Design and Accessibility Hub. A leading expert in universal design, her research explores the intersection of technology and user experience, focusing on how mobile apps and social media can improve lives, especially for individuals with diverse abilities. Dr. Lacano also investigates diversity in IT, particularly the experiences of women. As principal investigator for a $1 million NSF Advance grant, she leads initiatives to increase women's participation and advancement in technology. And we're going to start our conversation with Melissa Bradley. So, Melissa, how would you define neurodiversity, and why is it important for companies to view neurodiversity as an asset rather than as a disability?
Absolutely. Neurodiversity really describes the natural way that people think, learn, perceive the world, and even interact and process information differently. And for those who have these different ways of thinking can really help an organization thrive, thanks to the variety of perspectives and backgrounds that can improve creativity, problem solving, and even innovation. These types of abilities that people bring to the table can really help an organization recognize that differences are natural, and it only highlights the capabilities of their total workforce and the collective impact they can have on the entire business or organization.
All right. So, Grant, what are some of the key benefits that companies who are building a neurodiverse workforce derive, and how can you communicate these benefits to stakeholders?
Well, great question. Benefits really come from two perspectives, a human capital impact and a financial impact within the workplace. And we really see these across three different channels. One would be productivity, increase in productivity. Another would be an increase in innovation in those neat perspectives that were mentioned earlier, and also on problem solving. And a third is in employee loyalty and retention. So when the benefits on the human capital side is that there's better communication throughout the organization, from the boardroom to the mailroom. There's an untapped talent pool. The talent pool is deeper and broader. Increased employee engagement across the board amongst neurotypical employees as well. And also it makes the brand more attractive and creates brand loyalty within the employee ranks, but also externally with customers as well.
All right, thank you, Grant. So, Eleanor, what are some of the misconceptions that employers might have about neurodivergent job seekers, and how can those be addressed?
Well, thank you for your question, because I think this is something that is very relevant. I think what people misconceive is that they're not qualified, that the needs, the accommodations that they need are costly, when in fact 56% have no cost at all, and 37 have just a one-time cost of about $300. And oftentimes they're viewed as unreliable or not capable, when in actuality, accommodations, just like with all of us in the workforce, can oftentimes be easily made to help workers be productive. So I think a lot of the misconceptions that we see today are just that, misconceptions of the truth.
Thank you. So, Melissa, what are some of the challenges that neurodivergent job seekers face in the job hunting process, and how can employers help to address some of these challenges?
Absolutely. One of the outlying effects of those who are neurodivergent in the workplace is that many are typically already underemployed in their current roles. And this is very often due to the fact that they're not sharing their need to disclose a disability upon which they're trying to earn that position from the onset. And that's a critical point for young people at any stage in their careers, that they find that confidence and they feel it's not going to be used against them, but that they can help an employer who truly wants to provide the reasonable accommodations that they have in place, but they can't do so by asking themselves. So really, it starts with training your recruiters in what they need to look for and what they need to know about a potential workforce and potential hires for themselves. You want to train interviewers on ways in which to deal with, thinking, pausing, and deliberate pauses, and how that can vary between candidates, whether they've disclosed or not. And then understanding the physical nuances about eye contact and how that might present itself in someone who has autism, and how that's not a negative impact at all. It's just how they communicate and how they process information. Sometimes even helping someone understand that the physical aspect of what an interview can entail, and whether it's recorded or not, and how the recording itself and how having a photograph even of the building where the interview will take place can really help ease someone's anxiety and help them lean into these new experiences and environments so they can interview successfully in any environment the employer has ready for them.
Thank you. So, Grant, I wanted to go a little deeper on what Melissa was just saying. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the alternative methods and strategies that companies can use to attract and identify neurodivergent talent, and how effective are these alternative practices?
Yeah, great question. Happy to dive deeper. But first, I want to mention that as we look to the future of work, by 2027, which is right around the corner, upwards of 20% of the Fortune 500 is going to be actively recruiting and seeking neurodistinct talent in the workplace. That's a large number from some of the largest companies in the country. You're talking about Microsoft, and Ernst & Young, and SAP, and JP Morgan, and these types of organizations. They're seeking out this talent. And if they're going to seek out that talent, then they need to be able to provide a neuro-inclusive hiring strategy with fidelity throughout that process. So some of those things could be work trials, skill assessments, instead of the traditional sit in front of a panel, ask behavioral questions that the candidates may or may not know were coming at them before, which leads to another practice, is providing questions ahead of time. And instead of looking at that as a handout or a hand up to neurodistinct or neurodivergent individuals, you can do that across the board and provide questions to everyone to level that playing field. There are also partnerships with neuro-inclusive organizations like Potential Workforce, also using resources that have been created, specifically Autism at Work playbooks. There has been a playbook for the corporate sector and a playbook for the federal sector was just recently published in the last year or so. And also having a clearly defined accommodation process. And we've mentioned that and touched on it briefly about the fact that there are informal and formal accommodations, most of which cost nothing, some of which have a minimal investment, but versus the attraction of talent and the retention of talent, that is a small investment to make. When it comes to the efficacy of these programs, for example, Goldman Sachs had a internship program, an 8-week-long internship program, and they had 100% placement into their employee ranks from that neurodiversity internship program. So there is efficacy in these programs, and large institutions from finance to tech across the board are seeking out this talent. But in order to ensure that they are having the best experience and have the best opportunity coming in the door, it's best to include these neuro-inclusive hiring practices.
Thank you, Grant. So, Dr. Lacano, Grant kind of anticipated my next question, and understanding that there are a constellation of different learning differences that employers might have to deal with. What types of workplace accommodations are most beneficial for neurodivergent employees, and how can companies ensure that they effectively implement these accommodations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you're right that one of the biggest things I think with work accommodations is communication to understanding what the person needs, right? And that helps your whole entire workforce. Because what we've seen are things like flexibility. And so if there's medical appointments or work environments that may be a little bit hard to deal with when there's a lot of people, being able to kind of have flex times that you could come in. I know companies were really big on this open floor concept that really isn't great for a lot of people. So being able to wear noise canceling headsets, or for people with ADHD, being able to have music on so that they can concentrate. These are things that really kind of looking at the individual and what helps them, right? And it not only helps, I really want to make sure people understand it helps all employees when you can be flexible and work with employees. The other thing that I found even in my research is that good management really matters. So a lot of things that managers, like setting agendas and minute taking and things like that, managers often get away from. And when interviewing people who are neurodiverse in the workforce, these are some of the things that they actually like and want and feel more comfortable with. And so they're really encouraging managers to just do the right thing and to be good managers. And I think that is also something that companies need to think about, is really to practice good management. And this is helpful, again, not only to those who are neurodivergent, but to the entire workforce who benefits from this.
All right. So, Melissa, you kind of touched on this a little earlier, but I wanted to drill down a little more. One of the questions that neurodivergent job seekers always wrestle with is whether they should disclose whether they are neurodivergent or not. And I'm wondering, what is your opinion on that? Should they disclose, and what are the potential benefits and drawbacks of doing so?
Thank you. I know my opinion really is shaped by what industry is sharing with us, what our college graduates, our new college graduates are sharing back with us as well, and what that's shaping into. What so many neurodivergent applicants will share with us, both privately, publicly, when they have the arena, is that they want to be able to disclose that they have a learning disability or a learning difference or of any type, but they're really terrified it's going to be used against them in the workforce. And despite all the efforts that we'll do prior to that to help build that empowerment and that confidence, there is still that level of self-doubt that can cost them greatly, because if they can't disclose a particular need, then the employer doesn't know what to do in which to help them. So the idea of self-disclosure is really important to both the candidate and the potential employer. ADA prohibits an employer from asking or assuming anything about an applicant. And so it's the sole responsibility of the applicant, not his or her parent or representative in that fashion. So it's important, though, to make the connection that this level of self-advocacy, though, really truly can help be a catalyst for empowerment for that candidate over time when they're in the workforce, as it'll be the beginning of new opportunities for them to disclose how they learn best in an environment, because the employer then knows what to do to best support them.
All right. So, Grant, this is your bailiwick, so I wanted to kind of get some more amplification on this question. What role does corporate culture play in neurodiversifying a workplace, and how can organizations foster a more inclusive environment?
Yeah, I spend time in workplaces. It really boils down to three things. And some of these things we've all touched on in different ways, but leadership buy-in is number one. There's a stat that flies around. Anywhere between 20 to 25% of Fortune 500 company CEOs identify as neurodivergent, and many of them identify as dyslexic. However, that's not necessarily public information. They're not out and loud and proud about being neurodiverse because of the inherent stigma that comes along with that. So leadership buy-in and having champions within your organization is first and foremost. Flexible work environments and tools, and some of those have been mentioned already, from the actual hands-on headphones and these types of things, but from a more theoretical perspective, remote working opportunities and hybrid opportunities that we've been in this environment for some time. And last but not least, support systems and mentorship. So when we see support systems and mentorship, such as in Ernst & Young's Neurodiversity Centers of Excellence, you see the opportunity to guide new hires, and we've been talking about new college graduates or new entrants into the workforce. And what this really leads to overall is a better bottom line for organizations. You look at higher margins, you look at higher revenue, you look at higher net income. Also, from the human capital perspective, you look at reduction in absenteeism, upwards of 80%. You also see companies that are upwards of two times more innovative when they have leadership buy-in and when they have support systems and mentorship. And it also leads to increased job performance. If people are happier, if people feel like that they can voice who they are, they can bring their best self to work. We hear this concept of bringing your whole self, and we always bring our whole self, but it's not always our best self. So I like to talk about bringing your best self, but that reduces friction and miscommunication and angst and stress within the workplace, which leads to those higher revenues, which leads to that higher employee engagement. But it really starts at the top in that leadership buy-in and being authentic and genuine throughout their communication, throughout their strategic plan, and including and involving all of these employees is the best way to achieve organizational excellence.
Dr. Licano, the information technology sector seems to be one of the most welcoming for neurodivergent job seekers. What are the arguments for building a neurodiverse workforce in that sector?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we've seen, and we've seen this throughout history, right, is this need for competitive advantage through innovation and creativity. And I think what we see with people who are neurodivergent is that they think differently, their skill sets are different. And so tapping into that is really an important advantage, right? And we've seen a lot of, through history, if you go through people who have made Einstein and Thomas Jefferson and many others who have done great things, you will go back and see that they've oftentimes been shown to be on the spectrum. And so I think that's the biggest thing is we need people to look at problems in a different way. And that has been really important in the tech field. And I do want to echo what Daryl has said about studies. The one study in particular, Accenture, that came out that said companies that employ people with disabilities have 1.6 times more revenue, 2.6 times more net income, and 2 times more economic profit. So there are starting to be studies coming out that show that it matters. And I think these different perspectives are really helping companies.
All right. So, Melissa, you work with this on a daily basis at Beacon College, helping students prepare for their careers. So my question is, how can neurodivergent individuals best highlight their unique strengths and abilities on their resumes and during job interviews?
Definitely. The resume of yesterday is definitely different today for the new workforce that we're developing, not just at Beacon College, but at institutions all around the U.S. and for those job seekers who are changing careers and looking for new opportunities as well. One of the biggest things that folks want to remember and embrace is that look at those resumes as a living document that's growing with them over time based on experience, learning, new knowledge, and that can be tailored to every job description based on the roles that are being pursued. So many different employers of all sizes today are leveraging applicant tracking systems and other software tools to really qualify candidates at various levels and stages throughout the application process. So leaning into your resume as a document that's going to work with you and grow with you over time has got to be a mindset that all applicants really take advantage of. Even at a college like Beacon College, we really focus also on not just the resume, but what do professional portfolios look like? Online portfolios that can be a part of their application package that really demonstrate the learned knowledge and the outcomes and measurable outcomes of the work they've been doing in that progressive time period, whether that's through explaining and practicing the work they've done, showing evidence of that work, and those measurable outcomes, whether it be a job they've held, an internship they've had, or even volunteer work where they can really draw back from what their impact was and how they can discuss that with them. Just reading a resume and the bullet points that are in there is not the place we want students or new applicants to be in. And especially for our neurodivergent candidates, it's the idea of, can they speak to the very work that they have been achieving? And how does that work relate to the goals and the needs and the mission of the organization they're wanting to join? We really look at this as their, in a sense, a continuous improvement era, and adding and looking at what now can they do by way of new knowledge and new learning, credentials, micro-credentials, other types of opportunities where they're demonstrating their ongoing learning that leans into the needs of a business organization that they're hoping to join in the future.
So, Grant, I recall reading a survey a few years ago of companies related to whether they were interested in hiring neurodivergent employees, and some of the answers were kind of concerning, that they were concerned about hiring them because they thought their employees would think they would weird, or they didn't want to have them out in front-facing jobs because they were concerned that their customers would think that neurodivergent people were weird. So that brings me to the question, what are some of the challenges that companies have in hiring and managing neurodivergent employees, and what are some of the solutions that have proven effective?
Well, Daryl, thank you for sharing that information. First and foremost, from a holistic global perspective, neurodiversity is all around us and it affects all of us, whether you're internal, external, employee, or customer. 15 to 20% of the global population identifies as neurodivergent, and that's only what we know of. And 75 to 85% of the autistic population in the US is either underemployed or overemployed. I happen to be autistic myself, so this is the community that I am in. So those things, when you say people are weird, or that somehow if you hire an autistic person or otherwise neurodivergent person, that they're going to somehow bring down the efficacy of your operation, the data, the statistics, the anecdotal evidence shows different. But those challenges still exist. So 3 challenges that come to mind. One is the traditional hiring bias, those traditional hiring paths that we have been stuck to since the Industrial Revolution for many decades now. And the solution to that is shift to a more skills-based and assessment-based protocol, job trials, et cetera, as I mentioned before. Also, education and training is important. That comes in. Another challenge is sensory and communication barriers. Some of those things that we talked about before in the accommodations process, noise control measures, but outside of that, just giving clear, concise, and consistent instructions and communication. There's corporate jargon. Using plain language is the best and most effective way to communicate with people who are neurodivergent, especially people who are autistic. And last but not least, challenge stigma and misconceptions. In my work and all the work that we do together, we are here to demystify and destigmatize neurodivergence in general, and me specifically within the autistic realm. So a solution to that is company-wide training. Obviously, training in and of itself doesn't get the job done. It has to be the right strategy. It has to be done with fidelity. It needs to be inclusive of the people who are getting trained. And it also needs to have a strong leadership advocacy, those champions from the leadership level, in order to emphasize individual strengths that are part of the common whole.
So, Dr. Licano, I understand that there are 4 critical practices that have been identified for building a neurodiverse workforce. Why are these essentials, and what are they?
Great. Thank you for that question. I think that Daryl has hit on some of the key things, the thinking about not just interviews, but job trials, because in interviews, oftentimes what we get are the groupthink. I'm going to select somebody who thinks like me, that I feel is like me. And companies don't need people to think the way that others think. They need people who are coming in and are going to think differently and be able to ask questions of others. I also think, yes, we do need advocacy and policies that come from top leaders. So top leaders being able to say when they have certain types of disabilities, because they can show that there's a path towards success. One of the major things, besides also, let me just mention before I get to the last point, that with accommodations and really looking at individual needs and not just looking at how can we just throw out specific technologies, but how do we look at each individual, right? Once we have people in a position, it costs a lot to replace them. So looking at their individual needs for accommodation is important. I think the biggest thing that I've seen comes with the management support and understanding, which gets at training, but a little bit deeper, because I think what we see is people fear what they don't know, and they fear making mistakes. And so a lot of managers don't know when they have somebody come onto their team what to do who's neurodiverse, right? So how do I, am I giving too much feedback? Am I not giving enough feedback? I often give people the example, if somebody's blind and they come onto your team, when is it okay if you see them walking towards a wall? Should you grab their arm? Would you say something, right? People, if they haven't grown up or around people who have a particular disability, they feel uncomfortable. And so really helping them answer their questions, right, from the manager's perspective. So this training needs to be something where people shouldn't feel bad asking questions that they may think are dumb, or may make them seem like they're not nice, because they're really, oftentimes people really are just trying to figure things out. And I think that's really important, is to help managers understand, to demystify, to help them see these people on their team as team members and not somebody who is neurodiverse versus neurotypical.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave the conversation there. Melissa Bradley, Grant Harris, and Dr. Eleanor T. Lacano, thanks for the knowledge.